You guys are all familiar with the Paris catacombs, right? Like the history behind it and stuff like that.
The
cemeteries were being overflowed with fucking bodies, and then they didn't know where to put them, so they decided to make the catacombs, which is another fucking city under Paris, and it like runs for fucking miles, bro. What I wanted to get at was there was some explorers who went down there, I think in the early 2000s, like deep ass part of the fucking catacombs that has not been explored yet, but they found a camera. They took it to the authorities took a look at it, and then what they saw on the camera was a guy, he's exploring the catacombs, like he looks like he knows what he's doing, and then eventually he just starts following these arrows on the walls and on the floor. Then out of nowhere he just starts getting frantic, and he starts running, and then he drops the camera.
Right? After about 40 minutes of these point of view shots and these pictures of bones, we hear his breathing get louder and louder, and all of a sudden he drops the camera. The camera just drops on the ground and keeps rolling. And it keeps rolling until it runs out of tape.
Was he alone? Did he see something, or was he just like afraid that he couldn't find his way back?
I think that's scary, because if the guy was really trying to find a way out, you'd start to panic, bro, because you don't even know if you're going deeper or you're getting out. No matter if you're going one way, just 1 second it takes to really get distracted and be like, wait, which way was I coming from again?
People are saying that maybe the video was a hoax, maybe it was actually real. Like, that's a whole like argument.
Somebody just put that camera down there too.
Yeah, because like
he's actually responsible for the deaths of up to 300 people in just a 14-month period. He's not really spoken about much. We talk to people here and they don't want to talk about Matthew Hopkins. It's almost a dark history that they want to forget. 3 hours after his death, he was brought up here and he was buried in an unmarked grave. If this was anybody else, I wouldn't drive 6 hours down here. Tonight, we know where that grave is, we know where that derelict church is, and we're going to take you there. Never been done before.
Think this has ever been shown on video?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Matthew Hopkins is like right here.
Hot.
Matthew, did you go to hell?
We have had people taken over by spirit. 4 days, 4 nights, poor Elizabeth, who was in her 80s, had no food, no water. She could barely speak. The nod of her head was enough for Matthew Hopkins to say, "You're a witch."
I heard get out. Ha ha ha, go away.
There's a few times that we've come down here and they're all dancing. There's a lot of satanic stuff that goes on down here.
Mocking us, Matthew. You're pure evil.
Oh, what is this?
I think we might be surrounded.
That was so loud.
Look at my eyes.
Matthew Hopkins, he was a religious man. Was he a serial killer? Was he just a religious fanatic? Or was he just in it for the money? By the end of tonight, hopefully, you'll have the answers.
This woman's scarf got tangled in a car's tire and snapped her neck. On September 14th, 1997 in France, a night of elegance turned to horror. Isadora Duncan, the legendary dancer, stepped into a sleek open-top automobile, her signature silk scarf flowing behind her. What was meant to be a glamorous ride would become one of the most disturbing accidents and deaths ever recorded. The scarf, which was impossibly long and dangerously loose, fluttered freely in the wind. But as the car gained speed, the scarf drifted too close to the spinning back wheel. The silk scarf wrapped tightly around the axle, pulling her neck back with unimaginable force. And without a warning, her body was wrenched backwards, slamming against the car's side, and it snapped her neck violently in an awkward angle, killing her. Witnesses described the horrifying moment as her neck snapped instantly. Her death was immediate and gruesome. The once beautiful scarf that symbolized her elegance had become an instrument of death. The car stopped, but it was already too late. Isadora Duncan laid motionless, her neck broken and her body twisted by the violent force.
The woman vanished 3 times and she's seemingly now gone missing for good. It was midday on the 16th of December 2008 in southern Manhattan, New York. Some men were working on a ferry deck when they noticed something extremely strange in the water. There was what looked like a woman in the water floating face down. They immediately sprang into action and rescued her from the water. She gasped for air and they were stunned that she was still alive. Her name was Hannah Up. She was a 23-year-old Spanish teacher who'd gone missing 3 weeks prior. They rushed her to hospital where she needed urgent treatment for hypothermia and severe sunburn. She told staff that the last thing she remembered was going out for a run. She was diagnosed with a condition called dissociative fugue. It's defined as a psychological state where a person loses awareness of their identity and engages in some form of unexpected travel. Hannah was obviously frightened by the incident but tried to carry on her life as normal. 5 years later, though, she would suffer the same fate. It was September 2013. She worked as a teaching assistant at that point in Maryland when her phone and purse were found abandoned on a path. Her mum reported her missing, and she remained missing for 2 days when she suddenly remembered who she was while she was in a creek. She went up to a member of the public and asked them if she could use their phone to call her mum. Then the following year she moved to St. Thomas in the Caribbean. On the 14th of September, she left a note stating that she was off for a swim before going to work, but she never turned up at work. She never called anyone to let them know what she was doing or if her plans had changed, and her clothing and belongings were found just abandoned on a beach. It's now 7 years since she last vanished, but her family refuses to give up hope. So what do you think? Where has she ended up? Is she still alive? Let me know in the comments.
Video for you guys. It's about a jinn. There's these Muslims, they're praying in a mosque, and one of the people that's praying ends up going crazy. He starts covering his ears, he starts screaming. Some people say he's possessed, or some people saying it's a jinn controlling him. I want you to let me know what you think.
Like a jinn revealing its true self?
Yes, and I want you guys to let me know what you think of the video as well.
He's like banging the floor, right?
He's banging the floor and also covering his ears. The reason why I believe that one's real is because why would you fake it inside a mosque, a very, very religious place, and also everybody else is not really reacting, they're all praying still, because I do know that's a very important thing. You must continue praying, and also why would he be covering his ears?
On August 23rd, 1987, in Alexander, Arkansas, 2 teenage boys, Don Henry, 16 years old, and Kevin Ives, 17 years old, left to do some late-night hunting. Their hunting trip would become a tragedy. Don's dad, Curtis, received a phone call that the boys were found shot and tied to the railroad tracks. He contacted Kevin's mom, Linda, and they both met with the police at Don's house. The authorities eventually told the parents that the boys had been fatally run over by a train at 4:25 a.m. There were 19 grams of cannabis found on Kevin, and the original theory from the police is that the boys high on cannabis died accidentally, or they killed themselves in a suicide pact. The boys' parents did not believe this was the case. The crime scene was not taped off and not treated like a proper crime scene, and not all of the body parts were collected. Rick Elmendorf, the chief deputy in Saline County, stated that they hadn't ruled anything out except foul play. They had ruled that out. This was not a murder. The police wanted you to know that. Why? How do they know this so quickly? I mean, it's definitely a little peculiar, right? The parents of the victims feel like not enough is being done. These 2 young boys are found dead in a brutal way, and they say, oh, they just smoked a lot of weed, went and laid on the tracks and died. And that's it. We're not going to investigate this any further. That's all that we're going to talk about it. Oh yeah, remember, it is not a homicide.
In 2013, 21-year-old Alyssa Lamb, a Canadian student, vanished while staying at the infamous Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. But it's what happened next that kept people guessing for over a decade. The Cecil Hotel is a dark history known for suicides, strange deaths, and even a connection to notorious serial killer Richard Ramirez. This unsettling reputation makes Alyssa's story even creepier. Alyssa was last seen in a security video from the hotel's elevator. In this footage, she's acting very strange. She presses multiple buttons, looks outside the elevator, and moves her hands in unusual gestures, almost like she's hiding from something that we can't see. After this, no one heard from her and her parents became worried. And just days later, Alyssa's body was found in a place no one expected, the hotel's water tank. After guests complained about low water pressure and an odd taste in the water, hotel staff found Alyssa's body floating in one of the rooftop water tanks. The strange part, the tanks were locked and the roof access was alarmed. And no one knows how she got up there. The autopsy ruled her death as accidental with no drugs or alcohol in her system. The report suggested she might have had a mental health crisis as Alyssa had a history of bipolar disorder. But still, to this day, questions still remain. What happened to Alyssa Lamb?
This YouTuber vlogged his plans for mass murder and decided whether to go ahead with his sick plan on the toss of a coin. This case will make you absolutely terrified to go to the supermarket. Randy Stair was a 24-year-old guy who loved to vlog on YouTube. He'd grown up living with his parents and his younger brother Jeremy, and the family was actually really well liked by all accounts. They lived in a lovely house with a little pool, and Randy was reportedly quite quiet and kept himself to himself. He was a pretty intelligent guy who enjoyed his own company and loved vlogging on YouTube and wanted to make it big. He nicknamed himself Andrew Blaze online and was quite obsessed with cartoon characters. He posted videos to a fairly large audience, but had a strange fascination with death. He was said to frequently daydream about dying. He would write stories at school about death, but his teachers just thought he had a wild imagination. They had no idea Randy would make his stories a reality. Randy gradually started opening up to his online following. He started expressing concerning fantasies about wanting to unalive himself. He thought doing this would enable him to cross over into like a cartoon kind of realm. He'd become obsessed with the cartoon character Danny Phantom and wanted to turn into him. He also had a more concerning obsession, the Columbine killings. He idolized Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. If you're familiar with the Columbine case, you will know that in 1999, these two committed an absolutely horrific school shooting. Randy appeared to be getting more and more angry and hostile in his videos. He could be seen using explicit language and going on rants about his dad. He was talking about how angry he was that his dad makes out like he does nothing when he actually works full-time at a supermarket. He also stated that his dad was incredibly lucky that he hadn't unalived him already, and he said that he could do it quite easily. On the 25th of April 2017, he posted online a disturbing video called Fate by Coin Flip. It's very bizarre in the video how casual he is, as he explains that if Heads wins, he would unalive himself at home. If Tails won, he would carry out a mass unaliving at his work. In the dramatic video, Tails ended up winning the best of 3 on the final flip. On the 5th of June 2017, Randy posted on social media that he was ready to unalive. On the 7th of June, he went to work to his late night shift at Weis supermarket in Pennsylvania. Now, he regularly did these night shifts, but this one would be a night shift like no other. During closing time at around 11 p.m, he started blocking off emergency exits. He continued to stock shelves and act like he was just working as normal. He was there that night with his colleagues Victoria Brong, aged 25, Brian Hayes, 47, who was the night shift manager, and Navy veteran Terry Lee Sterling, aged 63. Just after midnight, he posted a series of tweets, including "Goodbye humans, I'll miss you." He also posted links to videos detailing his murderous plans. He continued to block off exits of the store. He then put on black eyeliner and lipstick at his car and texted his mum to tell her how he wanted his remains disposed of. He pulled out 2 weapons from his car and headed back into the store. He callously shot Victoria twice, killing her. He then approached co-worker Kristen Newell, who had headphones on, so she actually hadn't heard the gunshots. It's reported that they both caught eyes and sort of looked at each other for a couple of seconds before Randy actually decided to turn away and not shoot her. She managed to flee and call 911. Meanwhile, Randy approached Terry from behind and shot and killed him. He then went up to his boss, Brian Hayes, and killed him before turning the weapon on himself. Now, police turned up to find all 4 people deceased inside the store. The supermarket was closed for some time while the community mourned the loss. In July that year, the store was reopened with a new interior and layout.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Something really strange happened in 1989. A father and son traveling through Stockton, California came across a camo jacket with a VHS tape inside of it. This was on the side of the road, they didn't think much of it, but they took it home to watch the tape because they were curious. When they started playing the tape, they realized they have just caught an arsonist filming his crime on camera. For some reason, he left his camo jacket with his filmed crime behind. The father and son turned the video over to investigators immediately. The next day, they were at the location where the jacket was found. And to be clear, the son and father did not take the jacket, they just took the tape outside of the jacket. The jacket was still there when authorities arrived. In the jacket, they found a wooden pestle, a ceramic skull, and then gloves. The voice of the arsonist was so calm, yet creepy. It was so creepy, they literally featured this on Unsolved Mysteries. Because it was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, this led to the arrest of a teenager who had apparently been playing with fire and experimenting for years. If the camo jacket in the video had not been found, he would have never been caught. I think Hulu or Netflix need to pick this story up and make a documentary about it. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below. This man in Georgia just got sentenced to life in prison after killing his stepmother for the sale of his childhood home. On September 4th, they finally convicted him of all of his charges. He got charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and deadly assault with a firearm. On top of the life sentence, they put an additional 5-year sentence on. Not sure what that's supposed to do, but they just added it for fun. His stepmother was 72 years old at the time of her death. The murder took place on February 17th, 2023. When police got to the scene, they found somebody in the driver's seat, his stepmother, dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Neighbors called the police after they found her slumped over and dead. Officers then searched the scene. They found a license, a social security card, and a bag of bullets that was traced back to William. When they located him, he did not want to comply with the police. He even reached for his gun. They subdued him and detained him pretty quickly, and they also matched blood on his jacket back to the victim, his stepmother. He did confess that he was with his stepmother that morning. He did not, however, mention that he murdered her. He said he didn't do it, even though he was caught on a surveillance camera. And now he's serving life. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. A former Miss Switzerland finalist was just killed and blended up by her boyfriend. Yes, you heard that right. He literally blended her body up into a puree. Kristina Joksimovic was found dead in February. And local media is reporting that her boyfriend Thomas is the one who killed her. He was taken into custody. He tried to appeal for a release, but he confessed to her killing already, so they kept him in and denied his appeal. The boyfriend claims that she came at him with a knife. However, evidence found that to be not true. They found her cause of death to be strangulation. According to the autopsy report, her body was dismembered with garden shears, a knife, and a jigsaw. He tried to puree the body and then dissolve it with chemicals to cover his tracks. Initially, her body was found a day after he murdered her. However, he told them he had found the body a month prior in the laundry room and panicked. On top of all this, he had no emotions describing her at all. Even confessing the killings, he was completely cold. They both have 2 daughters, and now those daughters will grow up without a mother and probably not a father. According to friends, he was also abusive in general. Let me know your thoughts about this story in the comments section below, and as always, these videos are for informational purposes only. I lost the comment talking about this. This is not true crime, but somebody wanted me to talk about the SpongeBob TV hijacking. This may or may not have happened, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt right now. On July 25th, 2005, something weird happened with a SpongeBob episode. The episode is called Your Shoes Are Untied. SpongeBob walks in here to the Krusty Krab, falls down, the entire episode freezes. Things get a little creepy, the zoom into the body happens, and it goes dark. This is now what you're seeing. Then, after that, all you hear is Patrick saying SpongeBob, SpongeBob multiple times. And this goes on loop for several minutes. After some time goes by, the static starts and then it stops. Now it's SpongeBob and Gary inside of a shoe. They're just staring at the camera, bobbing up and down. No sound is playing at all, it's still just that static noise. I mean, for anyone over the age of 12, this is not scary at all. However, the audience for SpongeBob is kids, so to them, this must have been terrifying. Then the transmission is lost and it goes back to normal, the episode restarts. Nickelodeon denies that the TV was hijacked or anything like that, but who knows what happened. Or if it even happened. Most of the time, these things are just creepypastas that get so big and popular that they merge with reality, and everyone assumes that just happened. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And remember, like I said, this probably is not a real thing. I just wanted to talk about it because somebody commented on it.
This is the most disturbing sporting accident ever. In 1991, the Labrathorn race was cancelled due to a horrible skiing accident. Gernot Rainstandler, a 20-year-old contestant, was going downhill at full speed when he suddenly lost control as he was approaching the finish line and then slammed head-on into safety nets at extremely high speeds. This then trapped one of his skis inside the net, which resulted in his leg almost being completely torn off. He then began spinning out of control with a trail of blood following him, staining the entire mountain. His body then stops at the bottom of the hill as a pool of blood forms around him and people come over to help. He also fractured his pelvis and was literally ripped in half. The impact caused serious internal injuries, fractures, and nerve damage. He was transported by a helicopter to a hospital where he received multiple blood transfusions. But despite receiving blood transfusions before and after the operations, he passed away from severe pelvic bleeding. This is just awful, and what makes it worse is that there's a video of the whole situation unfolding on the internet. Rest in peace to Gurnet, and what a terrible, terrible accident.
My son is a pedophile, and I just put a knife straight in his side. To do something today, just a little bit ago, that no father should ever have to do. And if I didn't love him, I would have went ahead and killed him. But I think he needs to be punished for what he's done, as I will be punished for stabbing him.
Earlier this year, that video was posted on social media by 50-year-old Lonnie Murray. And later that day, Lonnie was arrested for stabbing somebody. The stabbing happened here in a parking lot around Dayton, Ohio. Now, authorities did confirm that Lonnie's son was taken to the hospital after the stabbing, so it does seem like he actually did stab his own child. But what could have possibly driven Lonnie to do this? Those are the big questions that remain in this case because nothing has come out of this. Lonnie's son survived, but I couldn't find any information about him. And people have been questioning, was his son actually a pedophile or was this just some sort of a mental break? It's really hard to tell, but those TikToks confessing to the crime are a little bit disturbing to say the least. Especially when considering that this was a father stabbing his own son in broad daylight, the middle of the day in a parking lot, and accusing him of being a pedophile. The man in this video has been missing for an entire week. His name is Tyler Weathersby, he's 31 years old, and he's from my hometown of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. This is the last footage captured of him where he was walking alone last Wednesday morning. Now this is just really confusing. Tyler left his home last Wednesday morning. He was going on a walk by himself. It was a perfectly clear sunny day. According to those who know Tyler, he wasn't intoxicated in any way, and he was acting completely normally. But after going for that walk, literally in broad daylight, he disappeared. Authorities have been searching for the last week all over Sioux Falls, and they have no idea where he could have gone. Tyler himself is pretty active on social media. He runs a podcast and some online businesses, so it's really uncharacteristic for him to have just vanished. And I'm from Sioux Falls. This sort of a thing does not happen there. I mean, this is South Dakota. We've only had like one serial killer case in our entire history, and that case only involved 2 or 3 murders. Nothing strange really ever happens in Sioux Falls. Something also to note here is that Tyler is married to Mona Lisa Perez. I actually knew Mona Lisa through school. And you might remember Mona Lisa from a famous internet video where her significant other wanted to start a YouTube channel and ended up dying on camera from a stunt they were trying to pull. So this is just really weird stuff. If you are in the Sioux Falls area, the South Dakota area, I know that there's less than 1 million people in South Dakota, so there's not very many of you. Keep an eye out for Tyler because it's really strange how he just walked out and vanished. Child sex tourism is a problem that nobody wants to talk about. Basically, this entails older men and women traveling abroad to foreign countries to find children to target. And yes, this is a thriving multi-million billion-dollar industry. So in this series, we're going to expose some of these guys. Meet James McTurk from Toronto, Canada. Now, James, prior to his arrest in 2012, had already been arrested twice. Once in 1995 for possession of CP or CSAM, and again 3 years later after cops found videos of him engaging in acts with children in Cuba. Yes, the Canadian police had caught this guy twice for possessing CP/CSAM materials, and they had video footage of him abusing children in Cuba. But as it turns out, James was an avid fan of the country of Cuba. He traveled there very, very frequently. And even though Canada passed a law in 1997 that allowed them to prosecute people who headed overseas to meet with children, between 2008 and 2012, James traveled to Cuba from Canada 31 times. He had already been convicted of going to Cuba to assault children. Canada had passed a law that would allow them to prosecute him on those charges, and yet he was still allowed to travel to Cuba 31 times before he was caught. Then in 2012, when they finally decided to do something and they arrested James, they found photos on the camera that he was bringing back to Canada of him assaulting children in Cuba. So we can assume that each of those 31 times that he traveled there between 2008 and 2012, he was doing this exact same thing. I don't know how the system consistently fails to protect children, not only in Canada, but in America, Europe, every single country. But people need to be more angry about this stuff. I encourage you to go read about child sex tourism and what you can do to help out because this is a massive problem and literally nobody talks about it. This is one of the worst pedophiles in world history, and today he's a free man. Meet Christopher Paul Neal, or Mr. Swirl. Christopher was born in Canada, and early on in his life, he actually tried to become a priest. but he was denied due to a lack of qualifications. So instead of becoming a priest, Christopher chose to become another P professional, a pedophile. In the early 2000s, international investigators noticed that a number of CP or CSAM photos and videos were being released featuring this swirly face. In the videos, this man was seen violently abusing children. These videos were so violent and disturbing, featuring Mr. Swirl, that authorities' stomachs were turned. It was, according to investigators, some of the most disturbing stuff they had ever seen. Christopher, aka Mr. Swirl, was bold, and he uploaded over 200 images and videos and shared them across the internet. Videos once again depicting him abusing, if you know what I'm saying, children. But eventually, the authorities were able to unswirl his image. They found this image, they posted it online, and eventually he was identified. After being identified, Christopher fled to Thailand, but he was arrested there. Now, eventually, even though Christopher had been identified as one of the worst pedophiles on planet Earth, he was given only 5 years in a Thai jail. He was then released and sent back to Canada, where he was arrested upon coming home. However, after spending a couple days in jail in Canada, he was released. But less than a year later, he was rearrested in Canada after investigators checked in on him and found CP and CSAM on his phone and computer. So it's clear this guy couldn't be stopped. But what sentence did they give this hardcore pedophile who was found with CP and CSAM on his devices? Well, they sentenced him to 3 months. 3 months in prison with probation. After some lengthy court proceedings, he was eventually sentenced to 5 years in Canadian prison, but then for some reason they shortened that to only 15 months. And in March of 2017, Christopher was released back to the public, where he has been ever since. This is a man who victimized at least a dozen young boys on camera. A man who was completely unrepentant for what he had done. A man who was already convicted of crimes like this and then re-downloaded the same materials to his computers. And he only got a couple of years in prison for all of this, and like I said, he is a free man. So if you are in Canada, if you have relatives that live in Canada, tell them to watch out for this guy, because this is true. He is out there right now. It's shocking to me every time I do stories about this stuff. I do not understand why these pedophiles do not get more of a lengthy prison sentence. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You can get a much higher sentence for a drug-related offense versus what this guy did, which I think is just the scummiest and worst type of crime you can possibly commit.
Days after her wedding, this young woman vanished. Now she's been found dead. Melissa Dubain was 32 years old. She worked as a nurse and had recently celebrated her wedding in Hawaii with her new husband, Brian. They'd been together 10 years and they were delighted to be finally tying the knot after getting engaged in 2023. However, the celebrations were extremely short-lived. Just days after the ceremony, she vanished without a trace. She was reported missing by her loved ones after returning home to Portland, Oregon. She worked at a local hospital and her colleagues raised the alarm on the 4th of September after she failed to turn up to her shift. The call came in around 10:10 to police, and the local community immediately started looking for this woman. No one could get hold of her, which was really out of the ordinary. Investigators tried to trace her bank card to see if she'd been using it, but there was absolutely nothing they could find. Alarmingly, her car was also still parked at her apartment. Then, on the 7th of September, there was a very upsetting discovery. Police announced that they had found her remains. Another shocking revelation was made when police announced that Bryce Schubert, her 27-year-old neighbor, had been arrested. It's reported by officers that they believe that he was involved in her disappearance. The man fancied his colleague, so he did the worst thing imaginable to her boyfriend. It was April 2018. Thandar Singh was in a happy relationship with 31-year-old Mark Mangakat. The pair had a 3-year-old daughter together and had exciting plans for the near future. They actually lived in California but were planning to move to Las Vegas and make a fresh start. Thandar worked at San Francisco Airport, and being an attractive woman, one of her colleagues had taken a real shine to her. The man in question who'd been admiring her was 37-year-old Kevin Prasad. Kevin made his feelings known and on several occasions had asked the woman out on a date. Now, she continuously told him no, she wasn't available, she had a boyfriend. She had to keep rejecting Kevin's advances and he was not respecting her decision. Now, despite Kevin's interest in the woman, he actually never had a conversation or confronted Mark at all. Therefore, there was not really any sign of what was about to happen. On April the 25th, Mark went to the airport to pick his girlfriend up from work like he'd done many times before. Little did he know he was being followed. Kevin had hatched a murderous plan. He had an idea to stop his work crush moving away with her boyfriend. Kevin and alleged accomplice Donovan Rivera followed the pair home that day. As Mark was reversing his car into the garage, Kevin took out a loaded weapon. Suddenly, he sprayed Mark's car with bullets. All of this happened while Thandar was sitting next to him, and it's truly a miracle she wasn't hit. Tragically, Mark was killed and Kevin and his accomplice fled the scene. Now, due to the speed in which all of this happened, Thandar had no idea who it was that had shot and killed her boyfriend. Investigators knew they needed to speak to her to find out if he had any kind of enemies at all. When they quizzed her, she mentioned Kevin almost as an afterthought. She said, "There is a fellow at work who has an interest in me, but he would never do that." Kevin was found guilty of first-degree murder, firing into an occupied vehicle, and lying in wait, which basically means when you ambush someone. He was reportedly facing life in prison without parole, but I can't find it confirmed anywhere that that was the case.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This woman tried to sell her baby for $500. This case is absolutely shocking. Jessica Woods is a 33-year-old mother from Florida. Jessica was recently hanging around shops in her local area of Paltzka with her 18-month-old daughter. It's reported that one of the employees nearby asked Jessica if she needed any help. Now, shockingly, Jessica stated that no, she didn't need any help, but she would be willing to sell her daughter to the shop assistant. She stated that she wanted to sell her child for $500. Now, the employee obviously declined to buy a child off this woman, and Jessica then shockingly walked off and left her with the daughter. Obviously, the member of staff kept the child really safe and took her to a nearby police station. She told the police the horrific situation that had unfolded, and police obviously went then and arrested Jessica. Her poor child has been placed in foster care. Jessica was charged with child abuse, child neglect, and abandonment of a child.
Sarah Stern, right? She had lost her mother. She had gotten a big inheritance from her mother. Her aunt told her to not tell anybody, right?
Okay.
No friend, no family member. She ends up telling her friend Liam. They were friends since they were 6. Time goes by and shit until out of nowhere they can't find Sarah. They end up asking a few close members who was the last person that was always next to Sarah.
They said Liam, didn't they?
They start asking him questions. When was the last time you saw Sarah? And he's like, "Oh, yesterday we went out to eat. I dropped her off and I went to go to work. That was the last time I saw her." A couple of days go by. They started asking him more questions, and they were like, "Did she ever mention like she wanted to escape or?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, she has a lot of self-destructive tendencies. Her mother's loss would always get to her and stuff." But the thing that was weird about it is that why would she commit after finding about all of this money?
Makes no sense.
Some time passed by. He told his friend like some weird ass idea. Imagine a film where I kill this person and then I throw him off a bridge and
Oddly specific.
Yeah, exactly. So he went to the cops and said, he mentioned this story to me, but like maybe it was a crazy idea that he had, but I don't know, it felt like a little bit too coincidental. The cops end up telling him to meet up with Liam, and they put a security camera in there, like, call his confession? Watch.
I got the FBI on my ass, dude. About what? About killing Sarah. That's not even the worst part. The worst part of it is
Imagine being crushed to death on a theme park ride. It was October 2016 at the Dreamworld theme park in Australia. The Dreamworld website invites you to create happy memories that will last a lifetime. On the day in question, 4 people were riding the Thunder River Rapids ride. Now, 2 men and 2 women, including a brother and a sister, were on rafts on the ride. Tragedy would soon strike, however. 2 rafts collided and flipped over on the mechanical ramp. This crushed the individuals, killing them all. The victims were Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, Brusba Aragi and Cindy Lowe. The incident was stated to have been caused by a faulty water pump near the end of the ride. A coroner found a systemic failure by Dreamworld in relation to all aspects of safety. The park operator admitted to breaching safety laws and confessed to not reviewing the ride's safety risk in over 30 years. The park shut down for 6 weeks after the deaths, and they demolished the ride. They were fined the equivalent of around £2 million. Imagine your friend being murdered while on FaceTime with you. Kelvie McRae was a stunning 18-year-old from Florida. She was a beautician and a model and was described as being very intelligent with a flair for life. Earlier this year, she'd been living at West Palm Beach. Her ex-boyfriend was 19-year-old Keyshawn Shaw. The pair had been together for around a year when she actually broke up with him. Now, she stated that he really didn't seem to accept the fact that things were over between them. A day prior to the tragic incident in question, police got a 911 call. Kelvie told the operator how her ex had tried to strangle her and had held a gun to her head. He tried to hold her against her will, and as she tried to flee the scene and get in a car and drive away, he had apparently flung himself onto the windshield and smashed it. Police charged him with false imprisonment, aggravated assault and battery. The day after, police responded to yet another 911 call. This time, though, it was a report of a shooting. Kelvie had been apparently on FaceTime with a group of her friends. Shockingly, her ex suddenly shot her in the head, neck and back. The incident unfolded in front of her horrified friends on FaceTime. They obviously reported what they'd witnessed to police. When authorities arrived, they found the ex in the house with gunshot wounds himself. Kelvie was unfortunately deceased. Keyshawn was leaning against a wall and was arrested and transferred to hospital. He then later died from his injuries.
This mother drowned her baby in a bathtub to prove to her boyfriend that he was her top priority. 20-year-old Esperanza Ray has been charged with second-degree murder in the connection with her son's death. She initially claimed that her son died at a hospital on March 6th, but there was no record of the child ever being there. Esperanza then confessed to drowning and killing the boy, and then disposing of his body in a backpack, which she then threw away in the trash. And the crazy thing is, she allegedly did this because her boyfriend didn't like the child, and actually wanted her to put up her own son for adoption. Esperanza wanted to prove her loyalty to her boyfriend by prioritizing him over her own baby. She became upset at her son when he began to cry when she was bathing him. Esperanza texted her boyfriend indicating what she was going to do before she committed the awful act. A photo of the boy submerged in the bathtub was found on Esperanza's phone, and sadly, the young boy's body has yet to be found. Edwin Trudeau, who was Esperanza's boyfriend, was charged with aiding an offender after being an accomplice. This case is absolutely gut-turning, and how could somebody do this to their own son? Especially for someone that you're most likely not going to be with for the rest of your life. I will never understand these people's thought process when it comes to these cases. There was no reason for Esperanza to do this, like, at all. She really killed her baby boy because her boyfriend didn't like him. This is absolutely crazy, and may the young boy rest in peace.
I thought I had heard about all the worst cults, but nothing prepared me for this one. This is the Chijon family, a cannibal gang in South Korea hell-bent on literally eating the rich. So back in the early 90s, this group of guys bought a house in Bulgat-Mayon in the southwest of Korea. They christened it their murder house, and this is what they did to the basement. There were not many houses in the area, so they could go undetected for a while, but this was an incinerator that they built, and these were 2 jail cells. And before I dive in, if you want a full overview on this group, definitely listen to this week's episode of Heart Starts Pounding. See, they were working low-wage construction jobs, and they thought that the world had been corrupted by the rich. So their plan was to kidnap as many rich people as they could, hold them in these jail cells until they paid as much money as was possible, and then they would kill them and put them in this incinerator, and occasionally they would eat them. The only problem was these guys were kind of dumb, and they had a lot of trouble actually identifying rich people. So they ended up kidnapping and killing a bunch of poor or middle-class Korean civilians. There was one couple that they kidnapped from a wealthy area, but it turned out that the couple themselves didn't have much money. The husband ended up still giving a bunch of money to the gang, but at the end of the day it didn't matter, and they were still killed and put in this incinerator. And then afterwards they held a big barbecue for the whole neighborhood. There is so much to this story, like it doesn't do justice to just tell it here, so I highly recommend listening to this week's episode of Heart Starts Pounding.
Man found his wife kissing another woman and killed them both. It was the 29th of January 2023. Police officers got a call that no one expected. They were dispatched to a property in Green Bay, Wisconsin. 49-year-old Rhonda Kegelski was found dead in her home by her daughter. The daughter was absolutely horrified to find not only her mother dead, but also her friend, 53-year-old Paula O'Connor. Officers arrived obviously to a horrific scene. They soon learned that Rhonda actually lived with her partner Richard Sotka, aged 49. On the night in question, the couple were together, and Rhonda then invited over her female friend Paula. It's believed that the three of them were having a nice evening, and Richard decided to go for a shower. When he got out of the shower, he apparently found Rhonda and her friend kissing. In a jealous rage, he took a knife and stabbed them both to death. He was actually already on a tag for charges relating to stalking and violating a restraining order. He'd also been in trouble before for DV. He's now been convicted of killing both women and will be sentenced in May.
2021, Hunter Lewis was planning a detailed treasure hunt for his family, but he went missing on the final day and he hasn't been seen or heard from since. Hunter was a 21-year-old aerospace engineering student at Cal State Long Beach who was an avid outdoorsman. For 2 years, Hunter had been planning an elaborate 3-day treasure hunt for his family. He was so detailed with it that he created clues and keys with a 3D printer and hid these items all over Humboldt County, California for his family to find. The treasure hunt began on December 30th, 2021, and while his family started the game, he launched his canoe into the Pacific Ocean off of Trinidad Bay. And this was to place his final treasure on Flatiron Rock, which is a small island a few hundred yards offshore. But Hunter never came back. Once 5:30 p.m. hit and there was still no sign of him, his dad reported him missing to the police. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Coast Guard began their search by boat and air, but there was no sign of Hunter. During the investigation, it was concluded that the area Hunter likely launched his canoe from has a reef that's only visible at low tide, which makes it an extremely dangerous area to be in. Even the search and rescue team wouldn't search that area when looking for Hunter. In the following days, pieces of Hunter's canoe and a wooden cigar box that his father had given him washed ashore, but Hunter has never been found. His family continues looking for him and eventually solved his final treasure hunt clue. The clue stated that the treasure would be found where his heart is. To solve the clue, they used a 3D printed key, which, when aligned with the rock islands whose shapes match its teeth, ends in a heart that encircles Flatiron Rock. When Hunter first began planning the treasure hunt, he created an Instagram page dedicated to his family. On it, he said that a lost Lewis family treasure that they didn't know about was somewhere off of the North Coast. But his family now says that it's really Hunter who is now their lost treasure.
A woman has been found dead in a cemetery. It's believed that she'd been tied up and tortured. Reina Hernandez was a 54-year-old woman. She was last seen on the 26th of February in Washington. She was reported missing by her friends when she failed to return home on the 28th of February. They couldn't get hold of her, and so they alerted authorities. Just days later, though, she was tragically found dead. On the 8th of March, her body was discovered deceased in a cemetery. Now, this was in Mexico, in Mexico. Her body was actually discovered wrapped in a blanket. It stated that her hands and feet were both bound, and she had signs that she had been tortured. Authorities have indicated that they believe this to be a DV crime, but they've kept the other details fairly vague. It's been reported that a 61-year-old has been identified as a suspect, and they've actually been arrested on unrelated charges. A GoFundMe page has been set up to help to bring the victim's body back to the US to her family.
Do you remember the time when former Disney Channel star Kyle Massey was accused of having an inappropriate relationship with a minor? You may remember Kyle from shows like Cory in the House, and obviously That's So Raven. But recently, Kyle gave an interview and spoke publicly for the first time about all this, and his response is shocking. Kyle is now alleging that he is actually a victim himself, and that the mother of the victim is the one that tried to victimize him, if that makes sense. So the original charges stated that Kyle allegedly sent explicit videos to a minor between the years 2018 and 2019. These charges were filed in civil court in the year 2019 and were eventually dropped. The person was seeking $1.5 million from Kyle. But then in February of 2022, the mother contacted another sheriff's department and filed criminal charges. But this is where this gets really strange, because recently Kyle went on record and gave an interview and stated that he was actually the one that was assaulted by this mother who filed the charges on behalf of her daughter. Kyle's lawyer named Ariel actually provided receipts that showed that Kyle had met this mother in the year 2007. This would have been when Kyle was only 15 years old. According to the lawyer, the police statement that this mother provided to the sheriff's department claimed that Kyle had actually promised this mother that he wanted to move with her, he wanted to be with her. Keep in mind, this is when he was younger. And allegedly a witness in the case heard this mother remark that she wanted to become pregnant by Kyle in order to get Disney money. Now, something interesting though is that Kyle did admit that he had communications with this underage girl, the daughter of the mother, And he even claims in a vague sort of way that there was something inappropriate that was shared with the girl and that he immediately corrected the issue. But I don't know, this is just a really strange story. Let me know your thoughts on this below because I hadn't read this part, Kyle's part of the story, and for now it's really just one person's word versus the other.
This is the elevator video, one of the worst elevator accidents caught on camera explained. This video is about 40 seconds long and it takes place in India. It was filmed on an elevator CCTV camera. The video starts with 3 young children in the elevator going to their apartment. But before I continue, I'm going to explain the elevator design because it's extremely unsafe and dangerous. The elevator has a gate that you have to pull open when you get to your floor. And once the metal gate opens, you have to open the door to your floor. So entering and exiting the elevator is a manual process. The doors don't open automatically. But let's continue. 2 of the children safely get off the elevator, but the last child, as he's exiting the elevator, he decides to close the metal gate, but when he does this, the door to his floor also closes. So he's trapped between both doors. Some people think the door was closed by his siblings as a prank, which unintentionally trapped the young boy. The boy remained stuck for a couple of seconds, and then the elevator began to move. The boy instinctively tries to grab something to hold, but as the elevator begins changing floors, the boy's body starts to twist and bend in unimaginable ways and is completely crushed by the elevator. And that is where the video ends. It's an extremely horrible video, and emotionally it hits pretty deep. This child was only 5 years old when this happened, and I can't imagine the pain and sadness his family felt. It's just so heartbreaking, but just imagine his siblings actually played a prank on him. Can you imagine the guilt they will be feeling for the rest of their lives? Please don't go searching for this video because it's extremely disturbing and just sad. Hopefully me explaining it lures your curiosity away and you don't go looking for it, because in all honesty, this video will definitely stick with you.
If you ever see this chair for sale, do not buy it. The story behind this chair is absolutely horrific. So recently in Australia, these chairs have been popping up on Facebook Marketplace. For an average person looking at it, it seems to be a solidly built, finely polished chair. One chair costs $1,700 and 2 chairs is $3,200. And here's the description. You cannot buy these in the shops. They are made from top quality marine ply, hand finished, so no chair is exactly the same as any other. And I really do feel bad for people who bought these chairs not knowing the history of them. Well, it turns out these chairs were made in prison by one of the most psychopathic murderers to ever haunt Australia. The killer's name is William Patrick Mitchell, and in 1993 he committed a horrific family massacre with an axe. On that day, William went to target a woman who had rejected his advances. Her name was Karen Mackenzie. But when William got to Karen's home, he saw her 16-year-old son Daniel in the driveway, and he immediately murdered Daniel in the driveway with an axe. He then went inside the home, assaulted Karen, and murdered her with the axe as well, before he went to the bedroom of her 7- and 5-year-old daughters, Amara and Katrina. William then assaulted the 7-year-old Amara and then killed both of those girls in their beds with the axe as well. Now this crime is notorious because the Australian authorities have not released the full details of what happened. The authorities themselves claim that the true details are too grisly, too graphic, that the public can't handle them. I've never heard of something like this, but that is truly shocking and, yes, disturbing. So obviously it's a little disturbing that prison guards are selling these chairs handmade by a family axe murderer on Facebook Marketplace and pocketing extreme loads of cash off of them. Now, I read a news report that came out recently about how family members of the victims are extremely upset that prison guards are making money off of these chairs made by their family member's killer. And yeah, I just couldn't imagine having already purchased one of these chairs and then reading a news article like this. Because what the seller didn't include on this Facebook Marketplace listing is that the chair was handcrafted by an axe murderer.
This is the bear video, one of the worst animal attacks caught on camera explained. The local forest department of this village organized this bear hunt because of the bear attacks against humans in the area. The man in the video was tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap, but he was ambushed and mauled. The victim's piercing screams alerted his colleagues who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the gruesome encounter. As you play the video, you see the man laid out on the floor wearing a green jacket with the female sloth bear on top of him, and immediately you hear the victim's awful screams, and these screams are way different from any of the screams you will ever hear. The camera zooms in and you see the bear has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws locked around the victim's face. And it seems the bear is going for the throat.
Loud commotion can be heard in the background, and the crowd tries to stop the bear from attacking by firing their guns and throwing stones at it. As the victim wrestles underneath the bear, you see some of his injuries. His face and throat are covered in blood, and the ground is also stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a piece of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get the blood off its face, and it then goes in for another bite, and this time, biting the man's throat and pulling away sharply, and it appears as a piece of flesh hanging from the victim's head. The video then ends as the mauling is still taking place. There's rumors that there's a longer version of this video, but I haven't seen it yet. According to reports, the attack lasted about 10 minutes until the bear was finally shot and killed, but the injuries the victim had would result in his death. I don't recommend looking for this video, mainly because of the graphic nature, but also because the screams of the victim are definitely the worst screams you will ever hear. Just imagine being attacked by a bear and being pinned down underneath it, while it just rips you apart and there's nothing you can do. The thought of that is just absolutely horrific.
Do you guys remember last year when this Alabama prisoner escaped with the help of jail employee Vicky White, who had a romantic relationship together? 56-year-old Vicky White worked at the Lauderdale County Jail for nearly 2 decades, and her last day on the job was April 29, 2022. But instead of celebrating with her coworkers, she planned the escape of 38-year-old Casey White, who was serving a 75-year prison sentence over multiple charges, including attempted murder from 2015. The two had been in a romantic relationship for 2 years when they planned the escape together, and when that day finally came, they were on the run for 11 days, which resulted in a manhunt across 3 states. Casey was recaptured in Evansville, Indiana. But leading up to the capture, Vicky died by suicide following a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Last month, Casey pleaded guilty to first-degree escape in exchange for having a felony murder charge involving Vicky's death dropped. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the court hearing, Casey stated, quote, "I loved Vicky. I wouldn't drag her name through the mud for anyone in this courtroom. Vicky took me out because she said right was right, wrong is wrong. She was the first person who gave me a hug in 6 years. We just wanted a new life together. I chose this road and it cost me my life and freedom." End quote. He apologized to Vicky's family and said that her only regret was leaving them behind. At the court hearing, Casey also said that Vicky helped him escape because she thought it was unfair that he was still in jail when others have been accused of worse crimes and have been let out. But his charges from 2015 included home invasion, 2 carjackings, multiple shootings which left a dog dead and a woman injured, and he'd also tried to kill his then-girlfriend and hold her roommates hostage. Casey is also still facing a capital murder trial for the murder of Connie Ridgway, who was found stabbed to death on her living room floor on October 23, 2015. Police in Rogersville, Alabama investigated her murder, but her case would go cold for 5 years until Casey White, who was already in jail, confessed to her murder. He has since recanted his confession and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but he knew details about the murder that were never publicized. That trial is set to begin on August 14th.
This is a very recent case, and it's the story of 8-year-old Jackson Morrow. Having an 8-year-old son myself, this one really hits hard. Jackson lived in Michigan with his parents, Mia and Brian. The couple had been investigated multiple times by Child Protective Services over the treatment of Jackson, but he was never removed from their care. This is a prime example of being failed by the system. Jackson attended school at the Logan Autism Learning Center, but the couple soon became sick of the teachers reporting them to CPS for mistreating Jackson, and they pulled him out. Brian Morrow also has a daughter who used to live with the couple and Jackson. She stated to police that they didn't like to deal with their son as he smelt like urine, and they'd often lock him away in his bedroom, ignoring his cries. He even broke the bottom of his door so that he could stick his hand out. On May 3rd, 2022, 911 responded to a call from Jackson's grandmother. When they arrived at the Morrows' home, they found Jackson laying on the couch, and it was clear that he hadn't only just passed away. Jackson was extremely thin, and the couple soon revealed to police that he'd actually passed away the day before. They hadn't called authorities because they wanted to spend time with their son before they came and took him away. Later that day, the couple were tested for drugs, and both tested positive for methamphetamine. Jackson's autopsy revealed that he was extremely malnourished. He weighed just 31 pounds, which medical records show was the same weight that he was at just 3 years old. His cause of death was neglect, and it was treated as a homicide. In June 2022, both Mia and Brian Morrow were arrested and charged with 1 count each of first-degree murder. Both Mia and Brian had their charges reduced to second-degree murder after agreeing to plea deals. Mia agreed to serve a minimum of 25 years and Brian agreed to serve a minimum of 22 years. On sentencing Mia, Judge Laseta criticised her for doing nothing as her autistic son wasted away before her eyes. She said, "He looked to you to protect him. I don't understand this. He weighed just 31 pounds at the age of 8 years old." On March 13, 2023, Mia Morrow received a sentence of 25 to 50 years. And Brian Morrow is due to be sentenced on April 17, 2023.
TikToker Mahek Bukhari, her and her mom and Serene Bukhari, they got charged with life. Basically what happened was that girl Mahek Bukhari,
She was going viral, or
yeah, she was going viral mainly because she was posting videos about how she looks,
Okay.
and also how close of a relationship she had with her
Her
mom.
mom.
At first her mom didn't really care about it, but slowly more and more she starts liking the attention as well. Keep in mind her mom is married to her dad for like 20 years plus. The mom, she forms a relationship with 21-year-old Sakid Hussein.
So she was cheating on her husband
for the past 3 years, and she basically tried to cut it off. He didn't take it too well, threatened her to expose some nudes and sex tapes that they had. Oh, if you don't come back,
Your husband's gonna know that you've been cheating on him.
feeling threatened and her relationship with her
husband.
they ended up getting friends and some fanboys to help Mahak
jump the guy.
Sakib ended up getting his friend Mohammed to drive him to this parking lot where supposedly they were gonna meet. The whole plan was Mahak texted this guy saying, "If you give me the phone, I'll give you back all the money that you spent on my mom." But in reality there was no money. There's footage of him pulling up. He sees that there's 2 cars, there's people in the cars, and they have fucking shiesties and shit. So they dip, and then you can see the 2 cars following them. They start going like over 100 miles per hour until they end up ramming the back of the 2 guys. The cops come, ambulance comes, and they both died because of the accident. Quickly they find out that
I'm dying because I can't breathe. I'm sorry, Mum. This is part of the final text from one of the victims of the horrific Essex lorry deaths. It was the 23rd of October 2019 in Essex. Just after 1:40, lorry driver Maurice Robinson rang 999. Ambulance and police arrived to an absolutely horrific scene. There were 39 bodies discovered in the back of a refrigerated lorry. Tragically, the ambulance was not able to resuscitate any of them. Fatalities included 31 males and 8 females. There were 10 teenagers. The youngest victims were just 15 years old. Now, police arrested the lorry driver, who was 25-year-old Maurice Robinson. Maurice was from Northern Ireland, and police needed to get to the bottom of what on earth had gone on. Postmortems of the victims stated that they had passed away from a mixture of hypoxia and hypothermia. A huge investigation was underway, and in November, some information was released. One of the teenage victims had gone missing from an asylum centre in the Netherlands. Now, the victims were initially said to have been potentially victims of human trafficking, or may have paid someone to smuggle them illegally into the country. The family of one of the victims came forward to share a heartbreaking final text. The woman was 26 years old and sent a heartbreaking message stating, "I'm dying because I can't breathe," and then, "I am sorry, Mum." Her family revealed that they had actually paid smugglers around £30,000 to smuggle her into the UK. It wasn't until the 7th of November that all of the victims were formally identified. Now, the murder investigation was absolutely huge, as I said. Grisly details were revealed, and it was discovered that the lorry went from the Netherlands and the victims were trapped inside a refrigerated lorry for around 10 hours. They were said to have died excruciatingly painful deaths. They actually basically gradually suffocated in this trailer. Now, the motive for this crime and the criminal operation that went on was said to have obviously been financial. 2 men that played leading roles in the smuggling were jailed for 20 and 27 years. Maurice Robinson was given 13 years and 4 months. 3 other members of the people smuggling gang were also sentenced for conspiracy to facilitate unlawful immigration.
It's pretty rare for a judge in the UK to hand someone a whole life order, but this man has just received 2 for the brutal murders of his ex-girlfriend and her new man. Marcus Osborne was laying in wait at his ex-girlfriend's house as she came home from a date. He'd hacked into her social media accounts to find out where she was. He'd then gone round and gained access to her house while she was out. There was another woman in the house who hasn't been named in this case, as well as 4 children who were asleep in bed upstairs. Katie Higton had been out on a date with her new man, Stephen Harnett, and Marcus was really angry and jealous that she was moving on. They'd been in a relationship for 5 years, but Marcus was extremely abusive and violent towards Katie, so she'd ended the relationship. Marcus also had previous convictions for violent offences against 2 previous partners, and he'd served jail time. In May last year, Marcus was actually out on bail when he went round to Katie's house in Huddersfield. He waited until she returned home, and when she stepped through the door, he launched his attack. He was armed with a knife from Katie's kitchen, and he stabbed her a total of 99 times. 20 of those stab wounds were to Katie's face. Once she was dead, he had a wash, and then he used Katie's phone to lure Stephen round to the house. When Stephen walked inside, he attacked him in the exact same way, stabbing him a total of 24 times. He then went upstairs to where the other woman was, and he raped her at knife point. Just days before her death, Katie had actually gone to the police and reported the abuse that Marcus had put her through for 5 years. She told them that Marcus had threatened to slit her throat, and he'd also said that if she ever got a new boyfriend, he would kill them both. Marcus was arrested, but 2 days later, he was released on bail, and 5 days after that, Katie and Stephen were dead. On March 1st this year, Marcus was sentenced to 2 whole life orders for Katie's murder and Stephen's murder, along with 10 years for the rape of Katie's friend. I'll post another video and link it in the comments of the sentencing for anybody that wants to go and watch it.
This is Aokigahara, the forest. This place has become a magnet for death over the years, and it's steeped in mystery. So Aokigahara is located on Mount Fuji in Japan. It's a very beautiful forest with tons of trees, but its dark history started centuries ago. So it's been claimed many times that Aokigahara is a place where ubasute is practiced, which is basically the practice of bringing an elderly family member out into the deep forest or up on a mountain, leaving them there, and then allowing them to die alone. According to researchers, this was happening in the 1800s in Aokigahara. The forest itself has also been claimed for hundreds of years to be the home of Yurei, or the ghosts of many people, including the ghosts of those people who were left to die. And according to a lot of the mythologies, some of these spirits are not happy. They've even said that it's dangerous to be in that forest at night because of the vengeful ghosts that may be walking around the woods. In recent years, though, Aokigahara has gained the reputation of the forest. I'll just say the unaliving forest here because I don't want to be censored. Because it has become a magnet for people to come and take their own lives. The forest floor is littered nowadays with remnants and possessions of the dead. In 2003, for example, 105 bodies were found alone in that year in Aokigahara. And in 2010, it was reported that over 200 people had tried to take their own lives in the forest, with 53 of them being successful. It's estimated that there are hundreds of bodies that are still somewhere deep in the woods. I mean, it's a massive forest. Something about the forest that I've always thought was really eerie was the ropes. Oftentimes, those who venture deep into the forest leave a trail of rope, meaning that they may be pondering taking their own life, so they bring a rope with them so that if they do get lost deep in the woods, they have a rope that they can tug on that will lead them all the way out. But there are tons of ropes in the woods that lead to nowhere, meaning that the person who went in never came back out. It's really a tragic story because nobody knows exactly why so many people are choosing to end their lives in the woods. Some say that it's because it's such a beautiful place. A place that's really quiet and isolated from the busy Japanese society. Others attribute this to a 1961 novel called The Tower of Waves, which describes Aokigahara as the perfect place to die, essentially. Obviously, Logan Paul was canceled back in 2018 when he visited the forest and was making jokes around the body of somebody that he found there. But I'm sure that this forest still has so many more stories that have yet to be told.
This is the scariest story about the peephole, and this story is absolutely disturbing. A 15-year-old girl named Donna lived with her father in a very small house. Ever since her mother died, Donna had depended on her dad for literally everything. One morning, Donna's father was leaving for a business trip and he told her he wouldn't be back until later that night. And with that, he kissed Donna on the cheek and left. Later that day, Donna got home from school and did some homework and then relaxed and watched some TV.
The clock then struck midnight and she noticed her father still wasn't back. So Donna decided to just go to bed. That night, Donna had a dream. She found herself standing on the edge of a busy highway. She then looked across the highway and saw a familiar figure standing there. It was her father, and his hands were cupped around his mouth trying to yell something to her. But Donna couldn't figure out what her dad was saying. She also saw that his eyes looked very sad, and he seemed to be desperately trying to communicate with her. She could barely make out the words he was saying, but it sounded like he was saying, "Don't open the door." Suddenly, Donna woke up to a tapping noise. Then suddenly, somebody rang the doorbell. Donna then got out of bed, got dressed, and then scrambled down to the front door. She then looked through the peephole and saw her father's face outside. He was staring directly at her and the doorbell was still ringing. "Okay, hold on, I'm coming," she shouted. She pulled back the deadbolt and was about to unlock the door when she suddenly stopped. She then looked through the peephole again and noticed there was something very off about her father's expression. His eyes were wide open and he looked very terrified. She then slid the deadbolt back into place and said, "Dad, did you forget your keys?" But the doorbell just kept ringing. "Dad, answer me," she said, but the doorbell continued to ring. "Dad, please, I need you to answer me. Is there somebody else out there with you?" But there was no answer and the doorbell continued to ring. Donna then yelled at the top of her lungs, "I'm not opening this door until you answer me." The doorbell continued to ring and her father did not answer her desperate cries. For the rest of the night, Donna sat in the corner next to the door crying and helplessly listening to the doorbell ringing over and over again. She then eventually fell asleep, and in the morning when she woke up, she noticed it was very quiet, so she got up and went over to the peephole. She then looked through it and saw her father still standing there staring. She then opened the door and was confronted with a sight that filled her with absolute horror. Her father's severed head was hanging from a nail above the door, and there was a note attached to the doorbell, and in weird sloppy handwriting it read, "You are a very clever girl."
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Dan Schneider, the man behind shows like iCarly and Victorious, has been accused of a number of bizarre things over the years, so let's talk about them. So if you don't know who Dan Schneider is, he's a former showrunner for Nickelodeon who had his hand in a ton of different shows. Shows like The Amanda Show, iCarly, All That, and so many others. And it was a few years ago when these allegations began to come out against Dan, so let's go back in time. First of all, we have to talk about how this guy has an obsession with feet. I mean, think about the old Nickelodeon logo. He had a hand in that logo being made. Here are just a few of his tweets from back in the day talking about children's toes. He's talking about Victoria Justice getting ketchup poured on her feet. This tweet that he made about Ariana Grande when she was a minor, calling her little and she's smiling at her co-star's feet. This one inviting a random fan online for a drive and asking them to rub his feet. Another one informing a fan to take a toe shower. And even this one where he asks for all of their fans, which most of which were minors, to send in feet pics. So obviously this is all really strange, but it was Dan's on-set behavior that really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So one of the things that former stars complained about was the fact that they were constantly sexualized on the show, which even just looking at this sort of stuff, you can see 100%. Two anonymous sources even came forward and claimed that Dan Schneider fought for more revealing outfits to be worn by the underage celebrities, and that he didn't like when the kids wore more modest outfits. He was also allegedly very handsy with the underage stars of the shows. He would allegedly have them sit on his lap on set, and people have also claimed that he would text the underage stars outside of work hours. I mean, all you have to do is look for photos and videos of him on set with some of these stars, and they're all obviously very, very uncomfortable with the way he's treating them and the way that he's acting around them. It also should be stated that Dan Schneider was eventually let go from Nickelodeon after this all became a huge deal, but they let him go because he was verbally abusive and would burst out with angry outbursts all the time while on set. I mean, there have been a lot of stars that have come out and spoken about Dan Schneider, including Jeanette McCurdy. In her memoir, she refers to a person known as The Creator, which people think obviously is Dan Schneider, and she claimed that he pressured her into drinking alcohol and then giving him a massage. And this is something that Dan has basically admitted to and asked for forgiveness for. He actually asked these underage stars of the shows for massages at different times. which is just, once again, really, really strange and should never happen. So basically, Dan was using his power and his position to manipulate all these people into giving him what he wanted, and no one was really able to question it. He would verbally abuse people, ask for these weird massages, pressure people into wearing things that they didn't want to wear. And once again, there's just so much feet stuff in his shows. I mean, just go look up a compilation on YouTube about all this. It's wild. There are also these tweets from Amanda Bynes that she tweeted a few years ago that are really strange. But I feel like there's still so much to this story that hasn't been told, and I hope we find out more about what really happened in the near future.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. The video that I'm about to show you is extremely disturbing. This is Kevin Cosgrove's phone call from the 105th floor of the World Trade Center 2. He was trapped on his floor after the World Trade Center got hit by an airplane. You can hear him getting more and more annoyed and frustrated with the dispatcher throughout these few minutes, and it unfortunately ends abruptly when the tower begins to collapse. You hear his last moments of life as he says he's too young to die. This really puts into perspective how scary and terrible 9/11 was. May all the victims rest in peace, and here's the audio clip.
So you can conserve your oxygen, okay? Try to take God to blow you in from the list. It's really bad. It's black. It's iron. Does anybody else want to try it in here? We're young men. We're not ready to die. I'm good. How the hell are you going to get my ass down? I need oxygen. They have a lot of apparatus on the doesn't feel like it, lady. You get them in from all over. Get them in from Jersey. I don't give a shit Ohio. Mine's high school. I must have called about a dozen times already. COSGROVE. My wife thinks I'm all right. I called her and said I was leaving the building. I was fine, and bang. Well, I want to go down. Cherry. Dead cherry. Dead cherry's next to me. 105. Whose office? John Astro's office. That's where you go. That's the office. We're in John Astro's office. OST. ARU. ARU. Right. That's the office we're in. There's three of us in here. OST. ARU. Hello? Hello? We're looking at financial center. Three of us, two broken windows. Message number 100.
This is the story of